Welcome to the Free Speech Center. I'm Ken Paulson, and today we've got a remarkable conversation with an outstanding young journalist. Her name is Anna Wolfe, and I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I have evidence that you are an outstanding young journalist. You very recently won the Pulitzer Prize. Does that feel like it belongs to you yet? You're okay with that now?
Yeah, right. It was pretty surreal for a little while, for sure. It definitely is, though, like validation of not just this one story I did, but the years of reporting on this subject that brought me here.
Tell me that since you won the Pulitzer, you've gone back for a high school reunion?
No, actually.
You have to go. You know you have to go.
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe like the 15 year or something.
Well, I've had the privilege of being a Pulitzer juror, and I have such a vivid picture in my mind of the room you walk into and the stacks and stacks and stacks of entries, all of which are projects that a newspaper somewhere felt was extraordinary and worthy of review by the Pulitzer jury. And then you end up going through the stack and you go, well, this is just excellent. Put it over there. Anyway, so I hope you understand and appreciate what a singular achievement this has been for you.
I just want to remember that, awards are not what we do this for. And I think one of the best compliments that I've received this far is someone that was a judge saying that the reporting and the writing didn't read like you wrote it to win a Pulitzer.
That's good. So let's make clear to those watching this why this honor was bestowed on you. It's a very powerful story in Mississippi. Essentially, the gist of it is that money intended to help the poor was instead directed for projects that had nothing to do with helping the poor. And it was your reporting that revealed the depth of the manipulation of the system. Mm-hmm. And in tandem with a state investigation, a story that might never have been told, was told. For those who are not familiar with this story, could you just give us the background, including where it began? What day did you wake up and say, you know what, for the next 3 years, this is what I'm going to be doing?
Right. So a lot of people probably first came to the story knowing it as like the Brett Favre welfare scandal, because he was connected to the scandal and was found to have been lobbying some of the officials for the funding that went to projects like a volleyball stadium at USM and investments in a pharmaceutical company that was supposed to be developing a drug to treat concussions. But that was just a sliver of really more like $100 million fraud or misspending scandal regarding the federal program Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which I began looking into in 2017 when I was still at the legacy statewide newspaper, the Clarion Ledger, because a story came out that showed that the state was only approving about 1.5% of people who were applying for cash welfare assistance. So this program is most well known as welfare, the monthly welfare check, right? And so there was just a very small, percentage of people who were able to access this funding, but it's a block grant. So it comes from the federal government to the state every year, about $90 million a year in Mississippi. So if we're not spending it on direct cash assistance to people in need, what are we doing with the money, right? And we're talking about a state whose philosophy around poverty is such that, we shouldn't be giving direct aid to people in need. We need to, help them pull themselves up by their bootstraps and give them workforce training and work supports and, potentially childcare so that they can get to work. That would have been a more valuable a resource than what they ended up doing with the money. But over time, I think the goals of the program just got distorted, right, over time. And there was this attitude that it wasn't going to be used to help people anyway. So what did it matter where it would actually be used? And we found that the money was going to all kinds of, kind of absurd programs like motivational speaking programs from famous athletes, and just basically whatever the state officials could justify as a program to motivate people out of poverty could be showered with millions and millions of welfare dollars.
Even a bureaucracy, though, has somebody who oversees that particular block grant and has to actually make sure the purpose of the grant is lived up to. Mm-hmm. Who is that?
So that's a good question. The director of the state agency, which is DHS in Mississippi, administers this program. That director has a lot of unilateral control over what the agency ends up doing with funding. But then you think about the federal government, right? What did they require the state to show for what it was doing? And that was one of the more surprising revelations, that it's written all there in the statute during welfare reform in the 90s, but the state does not have to tell the federal government what it's doing with these dollars. They supply these really vague reports that say things like, work supports, $9 million, or fatherhood and two-parent family formation, $15 million, and that's all the detail that we get for how these dollars are being spent.
You wonder if that's a lack of accountability on the part of the federal government, or if, as we've seen in a number of states, the states will turn the money down if they have to have any accountability. In the end, then the poor people cannot get any funds. I mean, it's not clear to me which way that cuts.
Right. I mean, the philosophy is that the states know best how to help their people. But I think that stories like what happened in Mississippi illustrate that that's not always the case, and that it just opens up the door for so much corruption and favoritism and nepotism. And I also want to say that because the regulations are that way, we don't know what's happening in other states. So there could be a welfare scandal in any number of states where these dollars have not been accounted for and no one has checked up on them.
So you have this sense, at least a strong sense, that perhaps these funds are not going where they ought to go. Is there a moment, is there a smoking gun that emerges where you go, whoa, this is much bigger than I thought it was?
I think back on the details that I was picking up on, before the scandal was really known. Like, for instance, the agency essentially at this time privatized welfare by doling out the money in really large sums, multi-million-dollar payments to just two nonprofits who were then supposed to send that money out. So I thought of it kind of as like a program management contract, which is kind of the ripest for cutting off the top, right? Now it'll never get past me again, but this is a maybe $1 to $2 million a year nonprofit going from $1 to $2 million a year to $20 million a year. I mean, that's red flag number one. So I was reporting that, and these were things that were not publicly known, right? So reporting that, reporting, other stories about money going to college scholarships for middle-class families, things like that were leading up to the auditor beginning his investigation, which happened as a result of a lower-level employee or a deputy at the agency, who I was actually kind of grilling at the time, and he was the one that I was kind of trying to get information from, actually gathering evidence behind the scenes to take up to his superiors that launched the investigation. There
are two tracks, as I mentioned. There is your reporting, there is an audit going on. Mm-hmm. Chicken or egg? Which came first? Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of more of a domino effect, right? I, again, started looking at this in 2017 because of the data around the application approval rates. And so I was putting in records requests. I filed a complaint against the agency that was successful. This was all before the auditor's investigation began. I think really probably the more important note is that the pressure that I was placing on the agency, and that others were too, right? Advocacy groups and certain Democratic lawmakers, did result in a agency employee blowing the whistle, essentially. So that is what led to the auditor's investigation. But I think also this came in phases. So the lead up to the initial arrests, that was just one part of the story, and then came reporters and other people trying to figure out what happened with the rest of the money. The initial arrests had to do with $4 million that we're talking about, not the nearly 100 that was misspent. So tell us who was arrested. Yeah, the initial people arrested in early 2020 were John Davis, the former welfare director, and the nonprofit director who, through which most of the money was flowing, Nancy New, and then some lower level characters, including a former professional wrestler who was working for the welfare agency and received contracts. And he actually went to rehab, and his rehab was paid for with welfare dollars. So there were a lot of purchases like that, really a long list of kind of absurd things that were happening with the money. How did you become aware of the involvement of a legendary NFL quarterback?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when the initial indictments came out, I read the charges, and there was a company that stood out to me as having received $2 million in stolen welfare funds from the nonprofit. That company was called Prevacus. It was a pharmaceutical startup related to a drug that they were manufacturing to treat concussions. And so doing some research, it was not hard to find out that Brett Favre was kind of a big Mississippi native character who was promoting and investing in this company. So I put in a records request. That's always first step, right? Put in a records request to the agency for any emails, communications related to Brett Favre and that company. And what came back was a calendar entry that the director had made where he said that the meeting to discuss concussion research as well as the facility at USM was requested by Brett Favre and the governor. And that was a huge revelation at the time. That was the first story that we published that really tied Brett Favre, and not just Brett Favre, but the former governor, to this overarching scandal.
Has the extent of his involvement been fully revealed?
Brett Favre?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that we still don't know. I think we know that the main pet projects that he had that were supported with welfare funds were, again, that volleyball facility at USM that received $5 million in welfare funds, as well as the pharmaceutical company. And I think the big question that everyone has is, can he be held responsible, if he did or didn't know that it was welfare dollars that were being used here? And I'm not sure that that's actually the important question. There were text messages that we published first where he was acknowledging that he didn't want the media finding out where this money came from and how much, as well as another text that has not been as well publicized where he actually asks, like, if I take this money, will it be perceived that I was taking money from schools, shelters, etc.? So whether he knew what TANF was or not, which do I think Brett Favre knows what temporary assistance for needy families is? Probably not. That's not as important as where he knew this money was supposed to be going.
And as evidenced by your reporting, he was relentless. He's asking for money. He's pushing aggressively. He's asking for help in securing construction of lockers. He's like he's on the job. He's a contractor. He's going to build this with somebody else's, with the state's money, the poor's money. So it's not as though a gift landed on his doorstep and he said, "Thank you very much." He lobbied for these funds.
Well, it's funny you say that, because he did say he thanked Santa when the first payment came in, because it was around Christmas time in 2017. I do want to, I'll make the note that, while all this was going on, while he was lobbying for funds for these projects, he also himself did receive $1 million from the welfare agency to do promotional activities, to cut a radio ad for the welfare program. So
and he knew it was for the welfare program.
He cut the ad for Families First for Mississippi, which was the kind of privatized name for Mississippi's welfare or anti-poverty initiative. Now, I feel like that's an interesting point, because did everyone who saw, Families First for Mississippi promotion, did they understand that that was welfare? Maybe not, but you had to understand from the ads that this was an agency that was supposed to be helping poor individuals.
You would think anybody with any level of self-awareness would say, well, wait, the $1 million you're giving me,
right?
Shouldn't that go to these people?
Right.
Amazing. What is also amazing is that you have had the time to do this story the right way. You work for Mississippi Today, which is one of a new generation of news organizations. It's nonprofit, I assume. Mm-hmm. And it has to be very selective in what it does. But some of the best journalism in the country is coming from online outlets that are nonprofits. And you came from a news organization that is badly understaffed, as so many community and metro newspapers are. You never would have gotten the time you needed to do the story properly if you're one of 3 or 4 reporters in a newsroom.
That's right.
So is the difference night and day for you as a journalist?
Yeah, I started looking into this story when I was at the Ledger, and I knew that I didn't have the time, when you're supposed to be filing stories every other day, to really get my arms around this program and build the institutional knowledge really around these public assistance programs that you need. These are complex, big, wonky agencies. to really do the story justice. And so when I went to Mississippi Today, I really went to the editor at the time and asked him to hire me on specifically to cover these issues, to cover public assistance programs and other programs and institutions affecting marginalized people in Mississippi, to get to really that heart of that economic inequality question in the state, and came with the first intention to really dig into TANF and figure out what was going on with this welfare program. And it did. I mean, it took, there were, weeks I didn't publish anything because I was so knee deep in this story, and that continues today. But I think when Mississippi Today started, it was important for the publication to kind of define what a Mississippi Today story is, right? We're not the statewide daily newspaper, we're something else. So I think that's been an important distinction to make. And I think we're still figuring out what a Mississippi Today story is, but I think the back channel is like the perfect example of, the value that we can bring to the media landscape in Mississippi.
So, spoiler alert, how did this all turn out?
Well, it's not over yet. It's far from over. So 7 people have pleaded guilty. If you're interested in the criminal side of the scandal, 7 people have pleaded guilty. None of them have been sentenced to prison, so there's no one sitting in prison today as a result of the scandal.
They're all probation?
No, they haven't been sentenced because the investigation continues, and prosecutors are, conceivably using them for information to continue their investigation into potentially other figures. So
is the former governor out of the woods?
I wouldn't say that. The former governor, Phil Bryant, and Brett Favre have not been charged criminally. That's important to note. Brett Favre is facing civil charges in a large lawsuit that DHS is bringing against people who received the money improperly. Phil Bryant is not facing charges in that lawsuit. So I think only time will tell, but we're going to stick on the story. And until those folks are sentenced, I don't think we can say anything is wrapped up.
To some extent, justice has been served, and there may be even more justice on the way. Do we have a level of confidence that the program is being administered properly today?
Yeah, I mean, that's the sad thing, is that, if your idea of a successful welfare program is people getting welfare, well, we're serving fewer people today than we were during the scandal. So those roles, the number of people actually receiving assistance continues to drop. I also want to note that the people who are receiving assistance through the program, like TANF is a work program, so those folks who receive cash welfare, they also are required to go to work, and they get a caseworker who helps them get employment and helps connect them to jobs. And so that's also not happening as a result of that caseload declining. Now, there's after-school programs and parenting initiatives, and these things are still being supported with these dollars, but it's not a very well-organized program, and the outcomes are really hard to discern.
One of the things we preach at the Free Speech Center is the role of a free press in protecting democracy, and they're lovely words. They're just lovely words, and they're poetic. And too many Americans have lost sight of the fact that in the very beginning, when the press of 1790 they were just rascals. They didn't publish the truth. They were as biased as anyone could be. You didn't start a newspaper because you had a shopping mall you wanted to get advertising from. No, you did it largely for political reasons, and you targeted your opponents. But even in that environment, the first generation of Americans said, we need more of that. We want that. We're going to protect that because somebody's got to keep an eye on people in power. Is that a driving force in your own career?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think holding powerful people accountable is one of the main objectives of the job. I am kind of notoriously separate and away from the political side, so I don't really I don't engage a lot with that side of things. I think people have asked me, has your reporting resulted in the kind of impact that you would like if no one's sitting in jail and the governor is still the same person and all these things? And I would say that it's not my job to sway elections. It's not my job to put people in jail. That's never been my goal, to see people punished. But I would say that an example of something I have been able to do is when I did a story on this single mother living in South Jackson who had a really complicated TANF case, and It affected her child support payments, and it was a really complicated situation. Basically, she had $5,000 that she was supposed to get taken from her by the state right before Christmas last year. And I spoke to the father of her children, who said, just by phone briefly, and I was just kind of asking him, what do you make of all of this? And he says, this is just what Mississippi does. It doesn't help the people who need help, but what does it do? It helps Phil Bryant, it helps Brett Favre. And I will never forget that, because he didn't know that I was the reporter working on that story, I don't think, and I don't know if he even heard of that story from Mississippi Today. It had, blown up nationally by that point. But the reporting gave him a way to talk about this corruption and this economic inequality that he already knew was existing. He didn't need to be told that, but now he had something to go on, some proof or some tangible way to talk about what he was experiencing, and that's empowering. And I think empowerment is an antidote to poverty.
Amid an environment where so often we hear about crooked media and biased media and fake news, I'm forever railing that journalism is the most idealistic profession on the planet. You get up every morning with one goal: to shine a light on what's happening. And I want to thank you for being an embodiment of that principle. The work you've done is remarkable. And I'm so glad you were recognized with the Pulitzer Prize.
Thank you.
Any thoughts on the next 10 years of Anna Wolfe's life?
Oh, well, I'm not done yet. So, I'm not done with this story even, and I'm certainly not done with Mississippi. So I think I'm just kind of seeing where that takes me.
Anna Wolfe, thank you for your great work and your time today.
Thank you.